I'm sorry. So I've created an EC2 instance, and that EC2 instance has this IP, which is 54.89.153.231. What I've also done is installed an Nginx server on top of it. And that Nginx server is listening to port 80. So whenever someone hits this URL, my Nginx server is receiving it and sending back a page, which you see right now at the on your screen. But I have also installed a Docker on my EC2 instance. I haven't done a Docker installation on my EC2 instance. We'll talk about it later, how we've done it and all, how we created this EC2 instance. We'll talk about it. Right now, this is the URL. And if I go to a specialized port, let's say 8081, I see another page, which is coming from a Docker container, which is currently deployed on my EC2 machine. Okay, I can show you that EC2 instance very quickly. This is the server which I have. This is the one. I have marked all the things required for me to access it publicly. So security group I've created, and I've opened the port, etc., etc. And we will go through these things, how to create an EC2 instance. If you don't know how to do that, we'll talk about it later. I'll show you with how to do this manually, as well as I will show you how to do this, via command line, or how you can do that with Terraform. So that is all we will try to do. Not today, but today our focus is that we have a EC2 instance, and that EC2 instance is, assume it's my staging server. Okay, so if you remember the pipeline which we were creating, originally we were discussing how the pipeline should look like, right? So if I go back to the same diagram again, let's see where I have it, maybe here, this one. You see, we are a developer, you have a source code is built, it's being unit tested, then we have to do some scans, then we have to build a Docker, we have to do Docker scanning, Docker push, and this special stage here was there, which is named as deploy in staging environment, right? So in real enterprise level setup, you always have multiple servers. You create multiple servers, you call them first dev server, then you can call it staging server, then maybe UAT server. UAT server is called as user acceptance test server, and then eventually you get an environment called as production. So each environment in some way or another loosely translates to a server. Okay, now we are doing a development, and while we are doing development, we are also creating a pipeline so that our code efficiently goes from point A, which is developer's machine. From there it goes directly to production. So this is the pipeline, this is the goal we have, but it will not directly go to production. It will jump from one environment to another environment, one after another, and each environment we do certain things, certain activities, then it jumps to the next one, then we do certain activities, and then it reaches to the production. But we will not do any of those tasks manually. We will be doing everything in an automation fashion or automated fashion. This is what we are trying to achieve. This is a mix of CI, continuous integration, and continuous deployment. Okay, in the last sessions which we had, what I showed you was only till this point, that is build Docker and Docker push. I did not show you deploy in stage, right? This is what I want to show you today. For that deploy in stage, what we need first, we need to have a server, a placeholder where I can deploy, isn't it? For that, I have created this EC2 instance called as my static site staging. I've named it as my static site staging. And this my static site staging has Docker installed in it. It has Nginx installed in it. So when I hit this, I get this URL, which is actually this one. But when I say 8081, this goes on to represent and Docker container already deployed on this EC2 instance, and this traffic from this URL and this port is redirected to that specific Docker container. Okay, now I will show you a small demo of how a continuous deployment looks and works. Okay, so see, I am a developer. You guys have created a pipeline for me. Okay, you guys are let's say DevOps engineers. I'm a developer. What I really wanted from you is whenever I write code and whenever I make a change, that change should automatically be built, tested, and being deployed somewhere so that I can then validate it, or my team then can validate whatever new changes I have made in the application. Fine. This is the use case. Now see what I'm doing now. So I will open my Visual Studio Code because that's what I love to use. You don't want to use it, don't use it. If it confuses you, then also don't use it. I'm using it because it gives me flexibility to handle my source code from my local machine. Let me open the project quickly. So I will go and open the project. My static site. My static site. Okay, this is my source code. I have my index.html at the moment kept here. Okay. Now what I'll do is, let me see if I'm on the right version. Okay, I think I am on the right version. I'm still not sure if this is the right. I think this is the right one. So I go here and I make a change. So I will go here and say, maybe I will add something here. I will say span my static site. I want this to be auto deployed. Okay, I made a change and then I say git status. And right now I'm using embedded terminal in my Visual Studio. You don't have to use it. Use your git bash to publish your code. Okay, I'm simply saying I made a change. I'm saying git add dot git commit -m, added a new change for auto deploy, and then I'm saying git push origin main. So my code is now pushed. Okay, I'll go back. This is not my original project. My project is actually this one. So I go here. You will see I've recently added this thing called as added a new change for auto deploy. Now what's happening behind the scene? Behind the scene, what's happening is GitLab saw a gitlab.ci YAML file in its repository. And there are special instructions I have put here, which I will explain word by word in a while. But this is what I have at the moment. We have defined some variables. I have some include, I have some stages defined, some Docker build, and some deploy to EC2 instance commands. I'll explain that. Okay, if I go back here, what I really want that my pipeline, the moment I made a change in my local, my pipeline should reflect and deploy it here. And if you see, the moment I refresh this, the change has automatically come here. Right? If you remember, this is exactly what I put here. This, my friend, is called as a nascent implementation of the concept called as continuous deployment. Okay. You see how what I've done? I was on my local machine. I said I put a command or whatever change I want to make in the application functionality, whatever it is. I just go, my developer just go here, made a change, whatever it is. Let's say I'm making another change, Akash, new change. Again, something like that. Okay, and I run the same thing again. I will just do git add, git commit. I'll make a change in the message. Yet another change, and I say git push origin main. Okay, the moment I did this, and I will refresh it, It won't happen immediately. It won't come immediately because my pipeline is still building. If I go back to my pipeline, go to build pipelines, and if you see my pipeline is running, I have 3 stages: Docker build, some semgrep sast, which we'll talk about later. This is for security scanning, and then deploy to EC2. So first stage is done. Second stage, I think I started, and then deploy to EC2 will be the next. Let's wait for it, okay? And if I go here, the change has still not come. The pipeline is still running, but the objective is my pipeline will detect the change, build the software, and deploy it automatically without me as a developer doing anything. So it has done that. So I have just made the change, Akash new change again, and the change has come here, deployed on my EC2 instance. Okay. How did I achieve this? Let's try to dissect this. So first, let me open the GitLab file. This is my GitLab file. Let me explain the stages here. So you know GitLab works in stages. I have 3 stages at the moment here, called as build, test, and deploy. So Docker build is a job. So you define stages here, then you define jobs. So this is a job which you have, and this job is attached to a specific stage called as build. So I've written Docker build and stages build. Fine. Now in this specialized job, I'm doing something special, that is to create the Docker image for my software and then push it. So it creates the image, it builds the image, and then it pushes it to a Docker repository or Docker registry. What I've used here, this is what we discussed last time. We are using a utility called as Kaniko. It's a Kaniko project. It was originally developed by Google. Google doesn't officially maintain it at the moment, but it has such a wide community that it's automatically being maintained by them. And it is widely used across all streams. The primary use case of this is to create, as we discussed, to generate the Docker image for your application. And this runs on GitLab. So in GitLab you have, and GitLab itself spins up containers, right? For its agent, for every job, it creates a container. And I'm saying here my image has the name as GCR Kaniko project executor. So I will give a reference of the Kaniko project, and within it I can pass this command called as Kaniko executor. Then I have to provide the context. Context means whatever it is which I want to build. So I will say, you see when you say Docker build dot, that's the context which you give to Docker for what you want to build, what are the files you want to include. So I'm saying I want to include the whole project. Docker file, it required Docker file as an argument, and based on the content of the Docker file, it generates the image. So to the Kaniko, you have to provide 3 main arguments, rather 4 main arguments. Okay, one is context, second is the Docker file, third is the destination, that is where you want to push it. And this was a question I think someone was asking before, that they want to publish this into Docker Hub. You have to provide a destination where you want to push it. You can provide multiple destinations also. Originally, I was publishing it into the GitLab registry system. So GitLab also comes with GitLab registry. That is, it's a Docker registry system of its own, which is somewhere located here in the container registry. Right, so this is where I was originally publishing it. There are 2 tags here for the same image. Tags here mean different versions. One was latest, another was this version. But this time I'm not doing it. I'm not publishing it there. I'm publishing it to the Docker registry. So the details of it I have maintained in the variables. What are variables? Variables are, if you have used Jenkins, it's similar to what Jenkins variables are. So variables are something which you will use across in your gitlab.yaml file. There are few predefined GitLab variables. So if I go to GitLab variables, so there are GitLab's CI/CD variables available. to be used. This is not the complete list. However, this tells you how to use GitLab variables. Let me go back and say GitLab variable list. This is circle CI predefined variable reference. So there are this list of predefined GitLab variables available for you to use. You can use them directly. You don't have to define it. But then you also have an option to define your own GitLab variables. That's what I have done here. So ignore these two parts at the moment. I have defined some SSH user or something. Fine. I have also defined some Docker related URLs. So these three things here: Docker image name, Docker tag, and Docker registry URL auth. These three URLs is what I would need so that my image is pushed to the Docker hub by Kaniko. Okay, and how I'm using it? I'm using it at two places. One is I'm saying something like this: echo auth Docker registry URL auth here, and then I'm saying Docker Hub username and Docker Hub token. Why I have to do this? For Kaniko to authenticate, because Kaniko wants to publish something in my own, however it's public, but my repository. I want to publish it there. The Kaniko wants to publish the new image there, so it has to authenticate, right? It has to authenticate. For authentication, what I've done, I have went. Let me open my Docker Hub. Okay, this is my Docker Hub account. I go to my account settings. In my account settings, I go to security, and here I need to create an access token. And that access token is what I will use and place it in my GitLab. Okay, so I have to say Docker Hub username, I have to say my username, and I have to say Docker Hub token. So these two things is what I need, or what Kaniko needs, in order to authenticate before it can push. So I'm saying Docker Hub username, Docker Hub pass token. I'm converting it to base64, and then I'm saving it within a folder inside this container. So kaniko.docker config.json. So this is where it wants to locate username and password for it to authenticate against this repository, which is this one. Any doubt so far? So far, so good. So whenever I executed this, every time, every build, it created the image and it was publishing it into my repository, which is this one. So you would see how many images I have here, how many tags I have here. Because I was preparing for this demo and I was running it again and again. A lot of things were not working in the beginning. I was struggling, but somehow I made it work, pulled it all together, and it started working. But in the process, I end up creating a lot of images one after another. Okay. Yes.
सर वो इंक्लूड के अंदर क्या था सर, एक बार मुझे बताएंगे इंक्लूड जो CIMI
where
सर यहाँ इंक्लूड टेम्पलेट.
Okay, this one is SAST. This is something which we discuss later. Fine.
Yes.
Let's assume it's not there. This is something for let me show you here, this part, SAST. But we are not doing it at this moment. We are not considering these checks at the moment. We are not even doing unit tests at the moment. We are simply saying source code build, then build Docker, and Docker push and deploy. So these are the stages we are actually kind of working at the moment. If I can mark them as green. Oh, no. Green, like this. So we are doing this. We have done this. Then we have done this part also. And then we have done this part, which is again green, and deployed to stage is also what I just demonstrated. The source code, build, Docker push, and deploy in stage. So build Docker is done by Kaniko, and this is what I am showing you right now. So Docker build, to do a Docker build in a CI/CD pipeline, which in itself is a Dockerized CI/CD pipeline, you need something called as Kaniko, or Docker. In Docker is what we explained. You know, last time, if you remember, we had two ways of creating it. One was Docker in Docker way. Second is Kaniko. If it was Docker in Docker, then it was pretty simple, right? If I can open that very quickly, because your understanding so far is always, it's about how you build a Docker image. You run Docker build command, right? If you want to go and develop your pipeline that way, then you can use Docker in Docker, something like this, and then you simply say Docker build. So in the very first class where we started with GitLab, I told you there are two ways of developing, or two ways of building your Docker images. One was using Docker with Docker in Docker. So if you want to use Docker in Docker way, then you will do this, and then you simply run your Docker commands, Docker build hyphen tag it, and then build it, and then push it. Docker build, Docker tag, Docker push. As simple as that. That's what you would also do when you would do, or when you build an image locally, right? Pretty intuitive, pretty straightforward. But that is not a very good way of doing it, because there is a performance problem with this. It runs slow, and then there is also a problem of privilege, that you need to give it more privilege, and it's not very secure way of building Docker images. Okay, so the best way, the ideal enterprise standard way of building Docker images is using Kaniko. To build Docker image with Kaniko, you need to put the image here like this, and this also we discussed, right? For every job, you can define a specific image in which that job runs. This also I've covered in the previous sessions. Then you have an image, and you have a name for that image, and then in the script part, you define what is to be built, what is the Docker file, and where it has to go. Okay, and that is exactly what we are trying to understand from it. So include part, I'm so sorry I put it here. Let me put it at the top. I supposed to, comment it out for now, because we are not doing any scanning at the moment, but later we will include it. But for now, let's just keep it this way.
Sir.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
सर जैसे DIND में हम स्क्रिप्ट देते हैं सर, लाइक उसको बिल्ड करना, फिर रन करना और कंटेनर क्रिएट करना होगा। तो वैसा इसमें केनिको में सर, जैसे हमने फर्स्ट स्क्रिप्ट में मेक डायरेक्टरी क्रिएट किया, फिर इको में हमने जैसे रॉकर रजिस्ट्री प्रोवाइड किया और यूजर नेम वगैरह, ये हम कहाँ पे प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं एक्चुअली सर ये?
Okay, so Kaniko is a project, okay, and they say that if you want me to build your Docker image, you have to provide me details in this format. So it is written in their documentation that if you want me to create the image and push that image into a specific Docker registry, you have to provide the authentication details, and the way to provide authentication details is this.
बट सर हम कहाँ प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं इसको, मतलब किसी फाइल में दे रहे हैं जैसे यूजर नेम पासवर्ड, या फिर कहाँ दे रहे हैं?
Okay, so you are asking हम ये कहाँ दे रहे हैं, where we are giving the values here, huh?
Yes sir, yeah.
Good. So that I'm coming towards. Okay, so once you put these things here, then comes the next question: where are these variables values coming from? Okay, so few is pretty straightforward. CI project directory, where this value is coming from? It's coming from here. So where whatever in GitLab, whatever starts with CI, its value is predefined. So GitLab makes sure that the value of that is predefined. So when you say echo CI project directory, it gives you the whole path of the repository basically, जहाँ वो checkout हुआ है. So it checks out and it gives you the project directory. Project directory means my static site on the pipeline. इसका URL. Okay. So project directory is straightforward. Where is Docker file kept? Docker file is kept where? CI project directory, which is the root where the whole source code is, and then /Docker file. So this is Docker file. So root and Docker file. Fine. This is also clear. Clear, right? Everyone getting it?
मीन्स हमें सर डिफाइन करने की जरूरत नहीं होती क्या? जैसे कि हम अगर जेंकिंस पाइपलाइन क्रिएट कर रहे हैं तो उसके लिए settings.xml में सब वेरिएबल्स डिफाइन होते हैं।
हाँ,
तो
right.
इसमें हाँ.
इसमें भी वही वैसे ही डिफाइन है. It's just GitLab is
And
managing it for you. Not, you don't have to manage it.
ओके ओके. एंड सर इसमें यूआरएल प्रोवाइड करने की जरूरत नहीं होती क्या गिटलैब की, जैसे हम गिटहब का यूआरएल प्रोवाइड करते हैं?
Nahi, because it's part of the same system, right? In the case of GitHub and Jenkins, there are two different systems. So Jenkins, you have to
ओके
provide
ओके,
the
गॉट
URL of
इट.
the GitHub, but GitLab has everything together, right? So you don't have to
या
provide few of those URLs.
ओके, गॉट इट.
Okay. So CI project directory simply mean here, and you can try with echo. So whenever let's say जब आप इसको run करोगे, when you guys will go and run this, you will simply say echo, and then you simply say this, and then this will show you what this CI project directory stores. Okay, and I have provided these two special variables at the top. This is again GitLab way of telling you, if you want more logs in your debug, then you can enable this as true and debug, and then this will show you more logs. So I will show you the detailed log also. There you can see the values of those variables very easily. But you can, when you go and give it a try yourself, this is what you will do. You will say echo CI project directory, and then this will show you what the content of that file or content of the variable, sorry. Okay, fine. So CI project directory is clear, CI project directory is clear. Now let's come to the Docker image name. Docker image name and Docker tag is what I've defined at the top. So my app, I want that this app goes to the Docker hub. For that, I need to provide the registry system URL here. So I'm saying docker.io, and then it has to go into my special registry, which is 333743. And then this is the name of my app or name of the repository, which is exactly simulating this. So you see 333, and then name is my static site, and then I have to say docker.io because it has to go into Docker registry. So I'm saying docker.io, and then I'm saying Docker tag. Now what is Docker tag? The Docker tag means that every time you build a software, you have to tag it with the right value. You cannot say latest every time, right? You have to tag it appropriately. So how I'm tagging it, what is unique with every change is the commit ID. This is exactly what I was showing you here. Okay, so every time I say git commit, it generates a commit ID, and when I push it, this commit ID gets to my Git repository, and then the value of this can automatically be fetched from the variable called as CI commit short SHA. This is also called as commit ID, SHA ID, digest. It has many names, but plainly it's called as commit short SHA. Commit short SHA means the 5 characters in the beginning of the commit ID. So this is quite a standard way of tagging Docker image. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Docker tagging. I think we did this in the first class where we say how to tag images. We are mostly doing Docker tag as v1, version 2, version 3, or sometimes git tag is also used. Sometimes it can have a combination of multiple things, SHA and branch name and tag name and all those things. But a pretty vanilla way of tagging a new Docker image is using its git ID. And that is what I have used. I'm saying git commit short SHA. So Docker tag is CI commit short SHA. Okay. And this is automatically again coming to me from GitLab directly. So GitLab has this variable, which you can go and see here. Okay, so you have git CI commit short SHA, the first 8 characters of CI commit SHA. This is again, if I go and search this, the commit revision the project is built for. And this is what I was just showing you. This is what it is. You can see that from here also. You can go to your build, you can go to your commits, and the commits, these are the values which we using which I am tagging. So every time a new commit happens, for each commit a new pipeline is created, and in that new pipeline a new Docker image is created, and that Docker image is tagged with the commit ID. Is it clear?
सर ये क्लियर हो
Yes.
गया सर। अभी इसके बाद में सर वो जो कमांड जो हम देते हैं जैसे डॉकर बिल्ड, डॉकर रन और कंटेनर क्रिएट करना, वो
हाँ,
सब कमांड्स वो कहाँ से लेगा सर? इससे ये
ओके
तो अभी हमारा वो सब चीज हो गया।
फाइन। सो अभी हमने डॉकर इमेज क्रिएट कर दिया, डॉकर टैग क्रिएट कर दिया। अब हमें कमांड नहीं देना है बिकॉज कैनिको इज टेकिंग केयर ऑफ ऑल दोस थिंग्स। अगर आपको कमांड, इफ यू वांट दैट अप्रोच आल्सो यू कैन टेक, बट फॉर दैट यू नीड टू use different approach. So let me show you again so that the confusion goes away entirely. So imagine now I don't want to use Docker. You guys, let's say, not comfortable with it. Let's say आपको लग रहा नहीं, मुझे नहीं करना है, समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. Fine, it's okay. You use Docker, DIND, this version, this way of doing it. And यहाँ पर all you would do is Docker build and tag, and then Docker login, and then Docker push. Okay, let me make that changes for you. So in Docker build T, you will say Docker image name, right? So you have to say Docker image name. For representing a variable, you have to say $, and then you have to say, put a curly braces around, and then you say the Docker tag. So now in the Docker tag, I will say like this. Okay, Docker tag. Okay, and then in the Docker login part, I have to pass the username and password. So I will simply use this Docker Hub username, which is this one, Docker Hub token, which is this one, that I will tell you from where it's coming later. And the Docker push, you will just push the, guys, give me a minute. Okay. So then you will say Docker push, and then you simply do this. What happened? Huh. Okay. So if you guys are not really getting Kaniko, forget it. Don't do it. Fine. But
सर
always,
आपने यस
yeah, go on, go on,
सर
go on.
कमेंट कैसे किए सबको, यानी कुछ शॉर्टकट से थे उसके लिए?
हाँ, command and / I use it for on my Mac. It's command and / for you. It should be alt and / maybe.
ओके
You can Google it. If you Google it, it will tell you what shortcut you have in Visual
ओके
Studio Code Windows, which you can use. Okay, so you said Docker build is I have commented. If you're not really getting, then fine, use traditional way. This also will work, as it just is slow and it is not really quite it's industry standard. People don't, in the real good enterprise setup, people use Kaniko, they don't use DIND, but it's okay for now to learn it, to understand it, so that you can do it. Use Docker in Docker thing. So now it's clear, right, what we are doing. So every time you do this, it will publish the image to the Docker Hub, which is this one. So all these images you see tagged with my commit IDs are coming directly here. Okay. So this is Docker in Docker, Docker building. This is what I expected you guys to do in the last assignment. I don't know. I thought it's easy, but of course there was a lot of confusion amongst you on how to really do this. So if you see the assignment, this is what I was asking. Create GitLab account, group and project. Build Docker container with GitLab. Take hint from this repository. I gave the repository. All you guys needed to do was to go here, copy the GitLab YAML file and paste it in your GitLab.yaml file, and then just run it. It should have worked. And try both approaches. I asked you guys to try both approaches, DIND approach and Kaniko approach. Both are here. DIND approach and Kaniko approach both are here. And push images to both the repository. Right now I'm not pushing to both the repository. I'm pushing it only to Docker Hub, but you can try pushing it to both the repository. And send a GitLab repository for checking. No one sent me that. I guess no one did that. Maybe that's why. And send your GitLab registry and Docker Hub registry in the group for checking. Fine. And that was for advanced, that you deploy it. This is what I just demonstrated in the beginning, that from using the GitLab, I automatically deploy it to my EC2 instance. This is what I will go and explain in a moment. Okay. So far, any confusion? And by the way, I also wrote here, so there were people who were saying that GitLab is not really coming very handy for them. Fine. We are not really GitLab centric. We are CI/CD centric. We want to develop our CI/CD pipeline. So if you think you can develop this with Jenkins, fine. The approach is still the same. Okay, the approaches will more or less will be same. Maybe your Jenkins pipeline is not Dockerized. Maybe your Jenkins pipeline is deployed on EC2 instance. Fine, then you don't need Kaniko. Maybe then you may not also need Docker and Docker. That also is okay. You will not need that. You can directly build it. It's also okay with me. Fine. But try to learn this approach, because the modern pipelines which we usually see in the industry these days are Dockerized pipelines. That means that Jenkins in itself running on a Docker. It's not, Jenkins is not, let's say, not running on EC2 instance or any virtual machine instance. It's running on Docker itself. And then since it's running in Docker, the master node is running in Docker, the agents are also Dockerized. And if the master node and agents of a Jenkins server are all Dockerized, then you cannot just directly do Docker build and all. You have to use either Docker in Docker, or you will use Docker Kaniko, or you will use Kaniko. So you must learn these things, because these are something which is widely used across. So whenever you go to into an actual real project, you're going to see that a lot. Kaniko and Docker and all those things. Okay, but we are not restrictive. So if you think you can do this well in Jenkins, do it in Jenkins. It's okay. I can help you with that also. Okay, I'll go back. Now, the question which I didn't touch upon is where the value of the Docker username and Docker Hub token is coming. Fine. Now, this is confidential information. Whatever is confidential information, I shouldn't be putting in my gitlab.ml file, right? Because if I put it here, my account, my project is public, anyone can come and see it. So I need to hide it. I need to put that into something called as CI/CD variables. Okay. In Jenkins, if you have seen Jenkins, in Jenkins there is a thing called as credential manager, and you publish your variables into credential manager, right? In GitLab, we have something similar. In GitLab, for saving these variables, you go to settings. So you go to your project, you go to settings. In the settings, you have something called as CI/CD. In CI/CD, you will see variables. Variables store information like passwords, secret keys that you use in job scripts. And here you go and define your variable. Okay, I have defined this in my project. If I go back in my experiments again, and I go back to my static site, you will see many variables there. Let me go CI/CD variables. So I have defined this Docker Hub token and Docker Hub username here. Okay, so this is where it's defined. I can open and show, but I don't want to open and show because it's being recorded. But this is where you will define. And once you define it here, and how you will define it, how you will save the value, from where you will get it, from your Docker Hub account, right? You go here, you go to account settings, and here you go to security, then you generate a new access token, you give a description, select the right permissions, and then once it's generated, you copy it. And after you copy it, you go back and click on add variable, you save the value there, whatever it is, whatever value you have copied from there. You say this is my Docker Hub token. Don't use protect variable for now. I will tell you the reason later. Sometimes people check it and then things doesn't work. It's only work for if you want this variable to be used in something called as protected branches. We are not there yet. Forget about it. Uncheck this for now. Protect variable. Uncheck this. Use expand variable. Only this one. You can try masking so that it doesn't show up in any of the logs. But don't do protect variable at the moment. And then say the value here, name of the token, add variable. Once you, whatever value given, name you have given here, you can directly then access it in your project. So you see, I'm using Docker Hub username. How this is not defined anywhere here, right? This is not defined anywhere here. How I'm getting this? I'm getting this from here. So Docker Hub token, Docker Hub token, Docker Hub username, Docker Hub username. Again, how I got here? I'm on this website. on my GitLab repository, I go to settings, I go to CI/CD, then I go to variables, and then this is where I define the variables. Okay, why I am doing this here? Because this is confidential information. In any tool, for CI/CD tool, let it be Jenkins or GitLab or GitHub, you are discouraged to store any credentials directly in your Jenkins file or GitLab file or GitHub CI/CD file. You shouldn't be putting any of those things directly in your CI/CD pipelines file. You should always keep them in variables where they are protected, safe, encrypted, no one can access it, and they can still be accessed via variable directly in your file with by referencing their names. So you say the same pattern, you say dollar, you say percentage, sorry, dollar, curly braces, start and end, and then name of the variable which you have given here. Same variable name which you given here comes here. So this is how we are getting Docker Hub and Docker Hub token. Okay, one mistake I have done here is I have not used, I've directly put SSH user EC2 user here. I shouldn't do that. I've done this so that I could demonstrate it how I can safeguard this. So I will just go and create. So I will say SSH user. I don't want to put it here like this. Okay, so I will go to add u variable. I'll say SSH user. I create a variable name here. Okay, you can give any name. I mean, you can give for EC2 staging. Let's say you want to say this. So I'll say EC2 staging. I'm giving this name, and in the value I will save the actual value. EC2 user is my actual value, so I will say EC2 user is my value. I remove it from protected, and that's it. Now my variable is safe in my GitLab variable system. I will say add variable, and variable is added. And now instead of directly saying EC2 user here, I will say something like this. This is the name I gave, right? So this will, when it runs, it will be replaced by EC2 user internally. Same goes true with SSH host. This SSH host is actually this one, right? This is the host of my EC2 instance. This is my host where I'm deploying it. That's what it is. So EC2 host, sorry. And yeah, so these are the variables, these are the stages, build within. I haven't explained the deployment part yet because I wanted to make sure that you guys understand what this is. And once you say yes, then I will jump and explain this small piece, which is actually doing the deployment. Okay, any questions so far? Everything clear? Is it confusing, guys? It is difficult. What's your feeling?
सर EC2 के हमें क्या क्या प्रोवाइड करना है? मींस EC2 होस्ट जो हम ब्राउजर पे डालते हैं वो, एंड
मैं बताता हूँ. That is something comes from when I will explain this. I'll tell you in a while. Okay, I'm taking 1 minute break, guys. I'll be back. Let me have some water. Let's continue with the deploy to EC2. By the way, any question? Okay. Now deploy to EC2 is what gives me this power of continuous deployment, which I just demonstrated. The moment I made a change, the change automatically went to my EC2 instance, right? The structure of the snippet is still the same. I'm saying deploy to EC2, stage as deploy, and then I'm using an image called as Alpine. Okay, now the background of it. Okay, I want to deploy something on my EC2 instance. What are the ways of doing it, right? I have a EC2 instance, which is, I think I've already, okay, how do you guys connect to EC2 instance? How do you guys connect it? Can anyone tell me what do you use to connect to EC2 instance?
Git bash or Mobaxton.
Sorry, what? Git bash and?
Mobaxton.
Okay. The easiest way to interact with EC2 or any server you have is SSH, and the securest way of doing it using SSH, right? SSH is secure shell. In secure shell, so if, for example, if I go here, I want to connect to my instance, right? What I do, I go to right click, I say connect. I get multiple options to do it. I'm saying connect EC2 instance connect. this directly will open a browser, and then I can directly do it from there. I can click on connect, and it will open a connection for me. Second way is using something called a session manager, and there is another way called as SSH client. This is what I use. So when I want to connect to my EC2 instance, I use SSH connection. I have SSH already, SSH client installed on my machine already. I am not very sure in case of Windows, maybe you can use PowerShell and install SSH library there and then make use of it. It's not, so shouldn't be very, very difficult to do that. But this is how I always have been using for connecting to remote server. I think this is also something which you guys should learn and use if you are not doing it. So then this is the right way of accessing any remote server from your local machine, from any machine, not even local. You can access one server to another from using SSH. Okay, how I do this? One way. Sorry, go on.
ये हम लिनक्स से ये ubuntu में करते हैं तो वो इसी तरह से यूज होता है ना सर वैसे करें
If you are using Ubuntu and from there you are trying to connect, then also you will use SSH, right?
Right.
Correct. So how I do this? Okay, I say SSH. Let's say I want to connect it from a local machine, right? So I say SSH. I say EC2. Okay, and this gives me access to my EC2 instance. Now this is a lot of things are hidden behind that I'll show you later, but right now I'm already logged in. So if I say Docker PS, it's telling me what it's currently running, right? You see, this is what it's running. My static site, and this is the container ID. This is the tag. If you see, this is exactly the tag which I just deployed. You can match it with the commit ID here. If I go back to my build and maybe code and say commits, okay, you see FC6B94D6 is SC6B94D6, right? This is automatically was deployed here using that deploy to EC2 job which I just ran. Okay, let me exit this. So right way to connect, if I make it a bit bigger, where was it? View bigger. Yeah, it's a bit bigger, I think. Okay, do it again. So I'll say SSH -i. I means you need to provide the name of your private key, well, or location of your private key, which you generated when you created this EC2 instance. And this part I will cover tomorrow, this EC2 instance part, and then how to connect it with EC2 and all those things I will cover tomorrow. But if you remember, when you go and create an instance, a new instance, you also get an option for generating the key, right? So when you go here, you give some name to your server. Come on, give name to your server, and then somewhere you get a key pair, right? So you have to, when you go and click on create new key pair, you get something which you downloads, and that download is called as private key, right? So this public key, private key concept is used in, can be used in SSH. Public key is something which is located in the EC2 server. Private key is something which is with you, and then you pass the name of the file name of that private key from here. Okay, and then you say EC2, and then you say user name, and then the IP address, the user, and then the IP address of your server. So once you do this, then you can connect it directly from a local machine, and then you can perform operations. You don't have to rely on your browser or to do anything. I have configured a lot of things. For me, I have made it very easy. What I've done, I'll just quickly show you that so that you get perspective what I'm doing here. So I have a SSH folder. You will also have it once you install SSH client on your machine. Then I have something called, this is my key. This is the static site key pair which I downloaded from EC2. Sorry, from AWS console. And then in the config, In the config, I have this value. So I am saying host EC2, host name is this, port is this, user is this, and I have also given the identity file which you give with the -i. So I have provided all those things in my config, and then the moment I say EC2, it gives me the connection to my server. So that's a kind of small configuration setting I have done so that I don't have to write -i and an IP address and everything together every time I want to log in. I simply say SSH EC2 and then it logs me in, and then I can run the command. So I don't have to rely on browser or anything. I can directly do it from here. So Docker PS, it gives me what's really happening inside. Okay.
Sir, EC2 only folder ना sir, EC2 folder है ना जो जिसके अंदर वो create किया.
SSH एक folder है. This is the folder SSH .ssh rather. Inside this I have all these things.
तो EC2 क्या है सर जो आप EC2 लिख रहे हैं मतलब?
Okay, EC2 जो मैं लिख रहा हूँ ना, this is the name.
Host EC2. Okay.
जो मैंने नाम दिया है यहाँ पर. That is what EC2 is. I can say whatever here. Oh, I can give whatever here. Huh? So if you are using this approach, you should try this config file. I will post it in the group later. Okay, so host EC2, and then I don't want to repeat this, right? Bar I cannot do this again and again. I cannot do say SSH and -i and then name and then EC2 user and then IP address, right? Every time I have to do that. So I have kind of configured it in my config file so that I don't have to do it again and again. So I just simply say SSH EC2 and then it connects using these details. So now I'm connected to my EC2 instance here with the user as EC2 user, and then Docker was already installed there, and I'm able to see what's really happening. I can run all the Docker commands here, Docker images or whatever, and all those things. Okay. Now, why I'm telling you SSH at the moment? The reason I'm telling you this is because that is exactly what I've used to deploy my new software or new container in my EC2 instance, right? So SSH, as you understood, right? SSH is used to run commands to get access to the remote machine and run commands there, right? That is what SSH is used for. It's a secure way of connecting one machine to another machine. One machine becomes the client from where the SSH runs, and then on the server you have something called as SSHD, that is SSH process, which listens at the port 22, and that you also configure in your EC2 instance, right? So if I go back to my EC2 instance here again, here, and if you see the instances, and I go here, and here if you see in the networking, I have, in the security, you see I have a port open, which is TCP 22, right? This is the port where this EC2 instance listens to any SSH request to get access, to get remote access to this machine. So generally, whenever you create an EC2 instance, whenever you create any server, usually you always open these two ports. One is 80, that is for public. Of course, if it is a public EC2, if you're doing that, then usually EC2 instances are always private, and you have a load balancer on top of it. That's the right pattern. Just opening up EC2 instance is not really always good, but let's say you are having a server and then you want to just make use of it, then this is how you do it. So 80 is where it listens. I have rather opened everything. This is the most unsecure thing I've done here. I have opened everything for the sake of demonstrating, but usually you open 80 where you listens to the main traffic, the default port of HTTP, and then 22 is the SSH port. This is where this is how I have connected here. So when I said SSH-i user IP, whatever I've given here, it connected to this port 22 on this my EC2 instance. Okay, so that's how I connected here, and then I can run commands and all those things. Fine. Why I'm telling you this is because that is what I have actually used to deploy my new container every time my pipeline runs. So I'm using SSH to gain control of my EC2 instance and then deploy the container. Is this the only way? No, there are many ways to do it. I could have used AWS utility of some sort, which could have given me access to EC2 instance, and I could have used some command in there and then did it. But I think I used the easiest, which was at my disposal to deploy something on this EC2 instance, and that's what I've used. Now going back to my repository, where is my, okay, here. Okay, so see what I've done. Come on. Let me make it again a bit bigger. Zoom in. Okay, so I'm using an image called as Alpine because every job we know in GitLab, right? So far we are very clear on this. I think you guys should also be very clear. For every job I need an image, because every job runs on an image. So either I define something at the top so that every job uses it by default, or I define that every time I create a job. So for every job I have defined an image, right? And in those images my code runs. So when I want to run this, that means there was a container which was created from this image, and inside that container these commands are running. Same goes here, same is true here. So here I'm saying Alpine, I have created a container from the base image as Alpine. This is a Linux distribution, and inside that I'm running some scripts. So I'm saying before a script, which is similar to script, but it runs before this runs. What I'm doing here, I'm installing something. What I'm installing, I'm saying APK, which is a package manager. I'm saying I want to install an open SSH client on this machine with this container. Then I'm setting up something called as SSH agent. And then this SSH agent is used for storing my private key, right? So going back to how I was connecting. So when I was connecting from my local machine, how did I get connected? I simply said SSH EC2, but before I did that, I needed a private key. This private key I downloaded from my EC2 instance, right? So from EC2 instance, I had this key pairs. From there, I downloaded this EC2 instance keys, right? So once I downloaded, there was two key combination. One was private key, second was public key. Public key was saved in my EC2 instance. So my EC2 instance stores public key, and the private key is with me. So this is the private key which I have. Okay, so this is where I have my private key installed, and this is also what I have saved in my GitLab variables. So if I go back to my CI/CD, go back to my variables, and where is it? SSH private key. Okay, it looks something like this. I shouldn't have showed you, but it looks something like this. It's not fully there, something like that. I would just go and delete it later so that it doesn't comes up in the public view. Once it's leaked, it's gone. Your server is compromised. As simple as that. Okay, so this is public-private cryptography algorithm, which is being used everywhere. Public and private key, where the public key is stored somewhere, private key is somewhere, and then private key is used to encrypt the data, encrypt the communication, and the public key will then go and see if this is coming from the genuine source, and then if it is find it right, then it takes the request, otherwise it declines, right? That's how it works. So the reason I am able to connect is because I had this private key with me, right? And every time I am saying SSH EC2, I'm able to connect to this. I'm opening this again and again to show you, right? So so this is the name of the identity file. So every time I want to connect, I need to pass this file in my command. Otherwise, the server, my EC2 instance, will decline the request if it doesn't find this. And that's the reason I also have to do something like this here. Okay, so I'm saying I have this SSH private key. I want to add this in the SSH cache so that whenever I run SSH command, it already has the private key. Okay. Ultimately, this is what I wanted to do. Guys, again, give me a minute. Okay, sorry. So the ultimate objective of me was that I wanted to connect to this server and run commands. And I mean, this is the objective. Why I'm doing it, why I'm explaining all this. I'm just again coming back to the reason of the whole goal. The goal is that I want to connect to my EC2 instance to deploy my Docker container, right? To do that, I need to first configure my SSH so that I can connect. So I'm saying apk add. So I'm installing OpenSSH client. Then I'm saving my private key to SSH agent. So I'm saying SSH agent. I've started the process, and I'm saying SSH add, and this SSH add will go and add that in the private key. Then I'm doing some make directory of s.ssh, and I'm giving some permissions, and then I'm eventually running the SSH command. Okay. So in the SSH command, I'm saying strict host key checking no, so that it doesn't ask for yes or no question. It does ask when you try to connect to a server. So it asks you whether you want to add this somewhere in the host and all. I'm saying no, I don't want to do that. And then I'm simply saying SSH user, SSH host, and this will be coming from here. This will be coming from SSH user and SSH host, which indirectly is coming from the CI/CD variables, right? So that will go and replace it there. And then in the quotations here, I'm running my actual command. So I see what I'm doing here. Docker remove forcefully my static site. Anything with the name as my static site, remove it. Okay. Then I'm saying and ampersand. That means I'm connecting two commands. I'm saying Docker remove -force anything by force my static site, and then deploy Docker run itd name my static site at port 8180, and then the actual container which I want to run. And this is how I am deploying my software, my new container onto my EC2 instance. Okay. Any doubt so far?
सर ये TR-D/R सर ये इसका क्या मीनिंग है?
Yeah, this is to remove certain characters from here, line carriage and all. So this is, I'm combining multiple statements here. One is I'm echoing it, then I'm removing something from the back, some line carriage or something, and then I'm adding it using SSH add command into my SSH agent cache, so that whenever SSH is run, it doesn't complain of private key, or it authenticates. See, you may find it a bit complicated. How will we go and write it? You don't always have to write everything on your own. I also did not write everything. I also Googled and copied, and all. The thing is that you need to know what it is. For example, if you don't understand what SSH is and how it works, then you will not understand the word here, what's happening. Okay, this line is pretty obvious because you know how to. If you don't know how to install a package in a Linux machine, then this you will not understand this part. So few things you must know before you can understand the code. For example, you need to know Linux commands. You also need to know how SSH works. I just gave you a glimpse of how SSH works. Maybe I'll explain it more, maybe in detail tomorrow when we create a new EC2 instance, maybe because I want to show you different ways of creating your server. So maybe that we can do tomorrow. But to understand this snippet, you need to understand how SSH works. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you will say, I will go and learn everything and then I will try this. No, that's also a bad approach. So the right way to do it is, I've explained you each and every word, why it's being used. Then you try to use it. You try to make it work in your machines and with your pipelines, and then slowly, gradually try to understand what's happening. Try to play around with it. What happens if I don't have this? Then does it work? What happens when I don't have this? Does it work then? So that way you can debug it further. But don't stop yourself saying, hey, I'm not getting it. ये क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे, tr-d क्या हो रहा है, I'm not getting it, so I will not use it until I get what it is. That approach is not always useful. Okay, I've showed you a code snippet. Try to make it run on your machine. I've given you some idea about what this is, why we are doing this, etc., etc. I have showed you that also. So try to implement it first, make it working on your machine, and then start digging deeper. Maybe then ask more questions. Try to play around, learn few things from internet. All you have to do is to go to internet, search this, and then you will get the answers. Go to Google, say SSH. Tell me everything about SSH, and you will get the list of things what SSH is and everything. Okay. Okay. Did you guys find it interesting? Find it complicated? Or completely bounced off your head?
Little complicated.
Of course, I mean it's complicated.
Sir,
but
complicated.
सर ये